Captain Nira watched the stars through her ship's viewing window. The peaceful journey through space had been going well for 3 weeks. Her crew of 12 Villani scientists were studying strange energy readings from this distant part of the galaxy. Their ship, Serenity's Hope, was small but comfortable. Everything seemed normal until the alarm started screaming. "Captain, we have a massive gravitational disturbance ahead," called out Navigator Cole from his station. His crystalline skin was glowing with worry. The Villani always glowed when they felt strong emotions. Nira rushed to the main control panel. The readings were impossible. A giant tear in space itself was forming right in front of them. The gravitational forces were stronger than anything their ship could handle. "Emergency reverse thrust," Nira ordered, but it was too late. The gravitational anomaly grabbed their ship like a giant hand. Metal screamed as the hull began to bend and crack. The lights went out for a moment, then came back on red and flickering. The ship's computer started announcing damage reports in its calm voice, but there was nothing calm about what was happening. "Hull breach on Deck 3, Engineer Vex reported, his voice shaking. "Life support is failing in sections 4 through 7. Radiation levels are climbing fast." Nira felt ice in her stomach. Radiation was deadly to her people. Even small amounts could kill them within hours. Their crystalline skin provided no protection against it. "Send out a distress signal on all frequencies," she ordered. "Tell them we need immediate evacuation. Medical emergency." The ship shook again as another section of hull gave way. Through the corridors, Nira could hear her crew calling out in pain and fear. The radiation was already affecting them. Their skin was starting to crack and dim. Communications Officer Lyra was bent over her station, working frantically. "Signal sent, Captain. Broadcasting on all emergency channels. Galactic Rescue should receive it within minutes." But minutes felt like hours as the ship continued to break apart around them. The artificial gravity failed in some sections, causing crew members to float helplessly. The air recycling system was making strange grinding noises. "Any response to our signal?" Nira asked. "The Galactic Rescue Center received our call," Lyra reported. "But they say they need to check resource allocation. They want to know if we can survive for another 6 hours while they organize a proper rescue fleet." 6 hours. Nira looked around at her dying ship and crew. "They would be lucky to survive 1 hour. Tell them we need help now," she said. "Not in 6 hours." Far across space, another ship was listening to the emergency signals. The human exploration vessel Defiant Dawn was part of a small fleet doing survey work at the edge of known space. They were looking for new worlds and mapping star systems that no one had explored before. Commander Jake Morrison was in his cabin reviewing star charts when Lieutenant Brooks knocked on his door. "Sir, we've picked up a distress signal from an unknown vessel. The signal is coming from coordinates about 4 hours away at maximum speed." Morrison looked up from his charts. "Unknown vessel? What species?" "Computer analysis suggests they're called Villani, sir. Never heard of them before, but the signal is clear. They're dying from radiation exposure and their ship is breaking apart." Morrison stood up and walked to his small window. He could see the other ships in his fleet, 3 military vessels and 2 civilian research ships. They were good ships with good crews, but they were far from home and low on supplies. "What's the status of rescue coordination from the main galaxy?" he asked. "The distress signal was sent to Galactic Rescue, sir. But according to our monitors, they're not launching anything immediately. Seems like they're having some kind of bureaucratic delay." Morrison thought about this. Going to help unknown aliens could be dangerous. They didn't know what kind of weapons these Villani had, or if the distress signal was real. "But someone was dying and no help was coming, sir." Brooks was waiting for orders. Morrison made his decision. "Call all ship commanders to emergency conference. We're going to help them." 20 minutes later, the 5 human ship commanders were talking over video links. Captain Richards from the military vessel Iron Wolf looked worried. "Jake, we don't know anything about these aliens. This could be a trap." "Could be," Morrison agreed. "But if it's real, they'll be dead before official rescue arrives." Dr. Elena from the research ship Medical Bay spoke up. "I've been analyzing their distress signal. The physiological readings suggest they're extremely vulnerable to radiation. Whatever's happening to them, they can't survive it much longer." Engineer Tom from the supply ship Heavy Lifter was checking his equipment manifest. "We have emergency medical supplies and hull repair materials. If they're small beings like the computer suggests, we might be able to help." Captain Davis from the 2nd military vessel Storm Rider was practical as always. "What about our mission? We're supposed to be mapping this sector, not playing rescue service for aliens. Morrison looked at each of his commanders on the screen. These were good people who had followed him across half the galaxy. He trusted their judgment, but sometimes a leader had to make the hard choices. Anyone who wants to return to our original mission can do so, he said. No one will think less of you for it, but I'm going to help these people if I can. One by one, each commander nodded. Even Davis, who was always worried about following orders, agreed to help. All right then, Morrison said. Prepare for immediate departure. Maximum burn to the distress coordinates, and get ready for anything. Back on the dying Villani ship, things were getting worse by the minute. Half the crew was unconscious from radiation sickness. The others were barely able to work. Captain Nira was forcing herself to stay at her post even though her vision was getting blurry. Any word from Galactic Rescue? She asked weakly. They say they're still working on it, Lyra replied. Her voice was barely a whisper now. They want us to try to move to a safer area. Nira would have laughed if she had the strength. Move to a safer area. Their engines were dead. Their hull was cracking more every minute, and radiation was flooding through their ship like water through a broken dam. Captain, Navigator Cole called out. I'm detecting ships approaching our position. 5 vessels moving fast. Nira felt a tiny spark of hope. Galactic Rescue? No, Captain. These ships, I've never seen designs like this before. They're not in our databases. On the screen, 5 strange ships were approaching. They looked different from any vessel in the Galactic database. Heavy, angular, built like they expected to fight battles instead of explore peacefully. The largest ship was sending a signal. This is Commander Jake Morrison of the Human Exploration Fleet. We received your distress call. Are you in need of assistance? Humans. Nira had never heard of them, but as her ship continued to die around her, she didn't care who they were. This is Captain Nira of the Villani vessel Serenity's Hope. We are in critical danger. Please help us. As the human ships moved closer, long-range sensors suddenly detected something else. 3 massive warships were coming from another direction, moving fast and not broadcasting any rescue signals. Morrison's voice came over the radio again, but this time it sounded different. Harder, Captain Nira. We show hostile vessels approaching your position. Stay calm, we're coming to get you. The human ships arrived at the disaster site like nothing Captain Nira had ever seen before. They moved through the dangerous gravitational fields around the anomaly, as if the twisted space meant nothing to them. Their ships looked heavy and strong, built to survive things that would destroy most vessels. Commander Morrison's voice came over the radio. Captain Nira, we're going to dock with your ship and start evacuating your crew. Our medical team is standing by. Nira looked around her bridge. Most of her crew was unconscious now. The radiation levels were so high that her people's crystalline skin was cracking and losing its glow. They were dying. Commander Morrison, you should know that the radiation levels here are deadly. Your people should not risk coming aboard our ship. There was a pause. Then Morrison replied, Don't worry about us, Captain. We can handle the radiation. Just stay calm and let us help you. Nira didn't understand how anyone could handle this much radiation, but she was too weak to argue. Through her ship's cameras, she watched the human rescue teams preparing to board. They wore thick suits and carried heavy equipment, but they moved quickly and without fear. Dr. Elena was the first human to step onto the Villani ship. She looked around at the cracked walls and the dying aliens floating in the corridors. The radiation detector on her suit was clicking rapidly, but she ignored it and went straight to the nearest injured Villani. This one is still alive, she called to her team. But barely. Get him to the medical bay immediately. The human medical team worked differently than anything in the Galactic medical database. They were rough and quick, but somehow gentle at the same time. They lifted the injured Villani carefully and carried them through corridors where the radiation should have killed anyone, without proper shielding. Engineer Tom was working on the ship's life support systems. He had opened panels that were glowing with dangerous energy, and was working with his bare hands on systems that should have required remote handling tools. How are they doing this? Whispered Navigator Cole, who was one of the few Villani still conscious. Captain Nira watched in amazement as the humans worked in conditions that would kill her people in minutes. They seemed uncomfortable, sweating inside their suits, but they kept working. It was as if they came from a world where danger was normal. The rescue operation was going well until the 3 alien warships dropped out of hyperspace nearby. They were huge, dark vessels with weapons bristling from every surface. Their ships looked designed for one thing: destruction. "This is War Prime Keth of the Zelthak Raider Fleet," a harsh voice announced over all frequencies. "Withdraw immediately from our salvage claim. The disabled vessel and its cargo now belong to us." Commander Morrison's reply was calm but firm. "This is a rescue operation, War Prime. We're evacuating injured civilians. Stand down and allow us to complete our mission. You will withdraw now or we will destroy you along with the prey," Keith responded. "You have 60 seconds to comply." On her dying ship, Captain Nira felt terror wash over her. The Zelthak were well known throughout the galaxy as violent raiders who took what they wanted and killed anyone who got in their way. They showed no mercy to the weak or injured. "Commander Morrison," she called over the radio, "please take your ships and go. The Zelthak will destroy you if you stay. Save yourselves." "Not happening, Captain," Morrison replied. "We don't abandon people who need help. All ships prepare for combat. Continue rescue operations." Nira couldn't believe what she was hearing. The humans were going to fight the Zelthak to protect people they had never met before. It made no sense by any logical standard, but somehow it felt right. The first Zelthak ship opened fire with energy weapons designed to slice through standard Galactic ship armor. The beams should have cut the human vessels in half. Instead, something impossible happened. The energy beams hit the human ship Iron Wolf and barely left scorch marks on its hull. War Prime Keth's voice came over the radio again, but this time he sounded confused. "What kind of armor are you using? That should have destroyed your ship." Captain Richards of the Iron Wolf answered with what sounded like amusement in his voice. "Sorry to disappoint you. Our ships are built a little differently than what you're used to." Dr. Elena was still working on the Volani bridge, checking the injured crew members. She looked up at Captain Nira with concern. "Your people are in worse shape than I thought. The radiation has damaged your cellular structure badly. We need to get you to our medical bay immediately." "But the battle," Nira protested weakly. "Your ships are fighting." "Our ships can take care of themselves," Elena said as she gently lifted the small Volani captain. "They're tougher than they look." Through the ship's sensors, Nira watched the space battle developing around them. The Zelthak were firing everything they had at the human ships, but the strange vessels just kept moving forward, their hulls scarred but unbroken. The human fighters were even more incredible. Pilot Lisa Park led a squadron of small craft that moved like nothing Nira had ever seen. They flew through the dangerous gravitational fields around the anomaly, using the twisted space as cover. When Zelthak fighters tried to follow them, the enemy ships were torn apart by forces that the human craft seemed to ignore. "How are they surviving this?" Engineer Vex asked weakly as the humans carried him to safety. "The gravitational forces should crush their ships." Tom looked down at the small alien with something like sympathy. "Where we come from, you learn to build things strong. Really strong." As more human rescue teams boarded the Volani ship, Nira began to understand that these beings were unlike anything else in the galaxy. They moved through danger like it was their natural environment. They worked in radiation that should kill them, fought in gravitational fields that should tear their ships apart, and they did it all to help strangers. The Zelthak were getting frustrated. More of their ships arrived, but their weapons seemed almost useless against the human vessels. The humans fought back with weapons that were simple but devastating. They didn't have fancy energy shields or particle beams. Instead, they used projectile weapons that fired metal slugs at incredible speed, and somehow these simple weapons were punching through Zelthak armor like it was paper. "What world do you come from?" Nira asked Dr. Elena as the human medic worked on her injuries. Elena paused in her work and looked at the small, fragile alien. "A place called Earth. It's not like most planets. Things are pretty rough there." "Rough how?" Elena thought about how to explain it. "High radiation, extreme weather, gravity that would crush most species, an atmosphere that's poisonous to most life forms. Earthquakes, volcanoes, storms that could destroy cities. Most galactic species would classify it as uninhabitable." Nira stared at her in shock. These humans came from a world that was basically a death trap, and it had made them strong enough to survive anywhere. The battle outside was turning in the humans' favor, but War Prime Keth had one more surprise. A massive dreadnought dropped out of hyperspace, a ship so large it cast shadows over all the other vessels. "Enough games," Keth announced. "We will destroy all of you with our planet-killer weapon. You have brought this on yourselves." The dreadnought began charging a weapon that glowed with terrible energy. Captain Nira knew what it was from the readings. A weapon designed to crack planets open, now aimed at the rescue fleet. Commander Morrison's voice came over the radio one more time. still calm despite the impossible odds. All ships, emergency maneuver Gamma 7, we're going into the anomaly. Into the anomaly? Nira gasped. That's suicide. The gravitational forces will tear your ships apart. Dr. Elena smiled grimly as she strapped the Volani captain into a medical chair. Like I said, we're from a rough neighborhood. Hold on tight. The human fleet dove straight into the gravitational anomaly like they were swimming into calm water, instead of flying into a death trap. Captain Nira watched from the medical bay of the human ship Stormrider, as space itself twisted around them. The forces that had torn her ship apart barely seemed to affect these strange vessels. How is this possible? She asked Dr. Elena, who was monitoring her vital signs. Our ships are built to handle just about anything, Elena replied, checking the readings on her medical equipment. Back on Earth, we deal with solar storms, magnetic field reversals, asteroid impacts. You learn to build things that don't break easily. Through the medical bay's reinforced window, Nira could see the other human ships maintaining perfect formation, even as space warped around them. Their hulls groaned and sparked, but they held together. It was like watching beings who had grown up in hell casually walking through fire. The Zeltek ships had followed them into the anomaly, but they weren't handling it nearly as well. Two of their smaller vessels were already breaking apart from the gravitational stress. Warprime Keth's voice crackled over the radio, filled with rage and confusion. What kind of beings are you? Your ship should be destroyed by now. Commander Morrison's reply came back steady and calm. We're humans. We come from a world that tries to kill us every day. This is just Tuesday for us. On the bridge of the Stormrider, Captain Davis was coordinating the rescue operation, while simultaneously fighting a running battle with the Zeltak. The human ships moved through the anomaly's twisted space like they belonged there, using the dangerous gravitational currents to their advantage. Marine Colonel Rex Harper was leading boarding parties on the remaining pieces of the Volani ship. The sections that hadn't been evacuated yet were in the worst parts of the anomaly, where the radiation was so intense it glowed visibly through the walls. Team Alpha, we've got survivors in Section 7, Rex called over his radio. But the radiation is off the charts. Copy that, Colonel, came the reply from his squad leader. We're moving in now. The human Marines went into radiation levels that should have killed them in seconds. They wore heavy suits, but even their advanced protection shouldn't have been enough. Yet they kept working, moving through corridors where the metal walls were literally melting from energy exposure. Volani engineer Thex was still conscious, barely, when the human Marines reached him. He watched in amazement as they moved through an environment that would have killed his people instantly, even with the best protection suits his civilization could build. How do you survive this? He whispered as they lifted him onto a stretcher. One of the Marines, a woman named Sergeant Brooks, looked down at him through her helmet visor. Practice, mostly. Our home planet has places a lot worse than this. As the rescue continued, more Zelthak ships arrived. But something strange was happening to them. The closer they got to the human fleet, the worse their ships performed. Their energy shields flickered and failed. Their weapons misfired. Their life support systems started breaking down. Warprime Keth was screaming orders at his crew, but nothing seemed to work properly. Why are our systems failing? Run full diagnostics on all ships. The answer came from an unexpected source. Volani engineer Thex, now safe on the human medical ship, was analyzing the sensor data with his remaining strength. Captain Nira, he called weakly from his medical bed. I think I understand what's happening. The humans. Their ships aren't just resistant to radiation and gravitational forces. They're actually generating some kind of interference field. Nira looked at the data Thex was showing her on a portable display. What do you mean? Look at these readings, Thex explained. The human ships are putting out electromagnetic signatures that are completely different from anything in our databases. Their reactor cores, their hull materials, even their life support systems. It's like they're built to operate in conditions that would disable normal technology. Dr. Elena overheard the conversation and nodded grimly. He's right. Our technology is designed to work on a world where solar radiation, magnetic storms, and cosmic rays constantly try to fry every electronic system. We build everything to be heavily shielded and redundant. Redundant? Nira asked. Backup systems for backup systems, Elena explained. If something breaks, there's always something else ready to take over. Our ships can lose 80% of their systems and still fight. The battle was proving this point. The human ships took hit after hit from Zeltak weapons, but they just kept fighting. Armor plates were blown off, revealing more armor underneath. Weapon systems were destroyed, only to be replaced by emergency weapons that rose from hidden compartments. It was like fighting a fleet that refused to die. Pilot Lisa Park was demonstrating this principle in her fighter squadron. Her ship had been hit 3 times by Zeltak particle beams, weapons that should have vaporized her craft. Instead, her fighter was still flying, trailing sparks and smoke, but somehow still operational. "Lisa, your ship is showing critical damage on all sensors," came the voice of her squadron leader over the radio. "Return to base immediately." "Negative, Commander," Lisa replied, spinning her damaged fighter through a series of maneuvers that should have been impossible with a crippled ship. "I've still got attitude control and weapons. I'm staying in the fight." She dove her dying fighter straight at a Zeltak cruiser, firing everything she had. The enemy ship, already weakened by the electromagnetic interference from the human fleet, couldn't withstand the assault. Its shields failed, and Lisa's simple projectile weapons punched through its hull like it was made of paper. War Prime Keth watched his ships being systematically destroyed by beings who seemed to ignore every rule of space combat. The humans fought like nothing he had ever encountered. They took damage that should have ended the battle and kept coming. They flew through hazards that should have killed them and used those same hazards as weapons. "What kind of world creates beings like this?" he demanded of his tactical officer. The officer was studying the limited data they had gathered about the humans. "Sir, based on their ship construction and their apparent resistance to radiation, I believe they come from what the Galactic Council classifies as a Class 12 death world." Keth felt ice in his veins. Class 12. Death worlds were planets so dangerous that no intelligent life was supposed to be able to evolve there, let alone develop space travel. The radiation alone should have prevented complex life forms from surviving. "That's impossible," he said. "No species has ever successfully evolved on a Class 12 world." "Yet here they are, sir," the tactical officer replied. "And they're winning." The human fleet was indeed winning, but not through superior technology or numbers. They were winning because they had grown up on a world that was trying to kill them every single day. Every challenge the Zeltak threw at them was something humans had already faced and overcome just by being born on Earth. Commander Morrison coordinated the battle from his command ship, while simultaneously overseeing the evacuation of the last Volani survivors. To him, this was just another day's work. He had grown up on a planet where hurricanes could level cities, where earthquakes could swallow mountains, where the sun itself could cook electronics with radiation bursts. "All ships, prepare for final assault," he ordered. "The Zeltak dreadnought is charging its main weapon. We need to stop it before it can fire." The massive Zeltak dreadnought was indeed powering up a weapon designed to crack planets. The energy buildup was visible across all spectrums, a weapon that could destroy entire fleets with a single shot. But the humans had one more surprise left. Instead of trying to outrun the planet-killer weapon or hide from it, they did something that made every alien in the system question their sanity. They flew straight toward it. "All ships, ramming speed," Morrison ordered calmly. "Target the weapon array. Make it count." Captain Nira watched in horror and amazement as the human fleet accelerated directly at the dreadnought's main gun. Any sane species would have tried to escape. But these humans, these impossible beings from their impossible world, were going to ram a weapon that could destroy planets. "They're going to get themselves killed," she whispered. Dr. Elena smiled grimly. "Maybe, but if we do, we're taking that weapon with us. And you're going to live to tell people about it." The human ship struck the Zeltak dreadnought just as its weapon reached full power. The explosion that followed lit up space like a dying star, and in that moment, the galaxy learned that humanity had arrived among the stars, bringing with them all the terrible strength of their death world home. The collision between the human fleet and the Zeltak dreadnought should have destroyed everything in the immediate area. The planet-killer weapon was fully charged, ready to unleash energy equivalent to a stellar explosion. When the human ship slammed into the weapon array at full speed, the explosion lit up space like a newborn star. Captain Nira closed her eyes and waited for death. Even inside the medical bay of the human ship, the blast should have vaporized them all. But when she opened her eyes again, she was still alive. The human ship around her was groaning and sparking, but it was intact. "How are we still here?" She asked Dr. Elena, who was checking her medical equipment to make sure it still worked. Human engineering, Elena replied with a tired smile. We build our ships to survive things that shouldn't be survivable. Asteroid impacts, solar flares, nuclear explosions. When you live on a world that keeps trying to kill you, you learn to build things that don't break easily. Through the medical bay's reinforced window, Nira could see the aftermath of the collision. The Zelthak dreadnought was breaking apart, its massive hull cracking like an eggshell, but 3 of the 5 human ships were still operational. Their hulls blackened and scarred, but somehow still holding together. Commander Morrison's voice came over the fleet communication system, calm as always despite what they had just survived. All ships, report status. Medical teams, prepare for casualties. The responses came in one by one. The Iron Wolf had lost its main engines but was still intact. The heavy lifter had taken severe damage to its hull but could still maneuver. The Storm Rider, where Nira was being treated, had suffered system failures across half its decks but was still functioning. 2 ships had been lost in the collision, the medical bay, and one of the smaller escort vessels. But somehow, impossibly, most of the human fleet had survived ramming a weapon designed to destroy planets. War Prime Keth's voice came over the radio, weak and filled with disbelief. This is impossible. That explosion should have killed everyone. Sorry to disappoint you again, Morrison replied, but we're still here, and you're not in any position to threaten anyone anymore. The surviving Zelthak ships were in much worse condition than the humans. Their advanced technology, designed to work in the safe, controlled environment of normal space, had failed catastrophically when exposed to the massive energy discharge. Most of their vessels were dead in space, their crews struggling to restore basic life support. But the battle wasn't over yet. The gravitational anomaly that had started this whole crisis was becoming unstable. The massive energy release from the destroyed weapon had disturbed the delicate balance of forces that held the twisted space together. Villani engineer Thex, still weak but determined to help, was monitoring the anomaly from his medical bed. Captain Nira, he called urgently. The gravitational field is collapsing. It's going to form a black hole. Nira felt her heart sink. A black hole would consume everything in the system, the human ships, the surviving Zelthak vessels, and any hope of rescue for anyone. How long do we have? Dr. Elena asked, suddenly all business. Thex's calculations were grim. 12 minutes, maybe 15. After that, the gravitational field will collapse completely and nothing will be able to escape. Commander Morrison had heard the conversation over the communication system. All ships, emergency evacuation protocol. We're leaving this system immediately, but it wasn't that simple. The gravitational collapse was creating massive distortions in space-time around them. Normal hyperspace jumps were impossible. The only way out was to navigate through the chaotic gravitational fields in real time, threading the needle between forces that could crush a ship like an empty can. Navigation. I need an escape route, Morrison ordered. Lieutenant Beth from the navigation department sounded stressed for the first time since Nira had been listening to the human communications. Sir, the gravitational fields are changing too fast. Every time I calculate a safe path, it shifts before we can use it. We need a constant stream of navigation updates faster than any computer can calculate. Then we'll have to do it manually, Morrison replied. Link all ships together with tractor beams. We move as one unit or we don't move at all. What happened next was something that would be talked about in military academies for generations. The human fleet linked their ships together with energy beams, creating a single massive formation with the rescued Villani survivors protected in the center. Then they began to navigate through the collapsing gravitational anomaly by instinct and reaction time alone. Marine Colonel Rex Harper was coordinating the rescue of survivors from the damaged Zelthak ships. Even though these aliens had been trying to kill them minutes ago, the humans were now risking their lives to save them. Sir, the Zelthak crews are refusing our help, one of his Marines reported. They say they would rather die than be rescued by prey species. Rex shook his head. Tell them they're not prey anymore. Tell them they're survivors, just like everyone else. And if they want to live, they need to swallow their pride and accept help. Some of the Zelthak accepted rescue. Others, too proud or too shocked by their defeat, chose to go down with their ships. War Prime Keth was among those who refused help, broadcasting defiant messages until his ship was crushed by the gravitational forces. The escape from the anomaly was like riding a hurricane while blindfolded. The human ships moved through gravitational fields that twisted space into impossible shapes, their navigators making split-second decisions based on instinct and training. Any mistake would mean death for everyone. Captain Nero watched the navigation displays with amazement. The humans were somehow steering their linked fleet through conditions that should have been impossible to survive, let alone navigate. Their ships groaned and sparked as gravitational forces pulled at them from every direction, but they held together. "How do you do this?" she asked Dr. Elena. "How do you make decisions so fast in impossible situations?" Elena was monitoring the medical status of everyone aboard, human and alien alike. "Practice," she said simply. "On Earth, you learn to make fast decisions or you die young. Storms that change direction in seconds, earthquakes that happen without warning, solar flares that can fry electronics instantly. You develop fast reflexes." The human pilots were demonstrating those reflexes as they flew through the collapsing anomaly. They moved their massive linked formation like it was a single ship, responding to gravitational changes faster than computers could calculate them. It was like watching a dance performed by beings who had grown up expecting the universe to try to kill them. Pilot Lisa Park, her fighter now docked with the main fleet, was helping coordinate the navigation from her cockpit. "Commander, I'm seeing a clear path opening up at bearing 270, but it's only going to be stable for maybe 30 seconds. All ships hard turn to 270, Morrison ordered immediately. "Maximum burn. Stay in formation." The human fleet turned as one unit and accelerated toward the gap in the gravitational chaos. Behind them, the anomaly continued to collapse, space-time folding in on itself like a closing flower. They made it through with seconds to spare. As they emerged from the anomaly into normal space, Captain Nero felt tears running down her cracked face. They were alive. Somehow, impossibly, they were alive. "Thank you," she whispered to Dr. Elena. "Your people saved us all." Elena smiled and patted the small alien's shoulder gently. That's what neighbors do for each other, even when they're meeting for the first time. Behind them, the gravitational anomaly collapsed completely, becoming a small but stable black hole. The space where the crisis had occurred was now empty, except for the slowly spinning event horizon of the new celestial object. But they weren't safe yet. The human ships were damaged and low on supplies. Some of the rescued aliens needed medical care that the humans couldn't provide, and they were still far from any civilized system. "Commander," came the voice of the communications officer. "I'm picking up multiple ships approaching our position. Large formation moving fast," Morrison sighed. After everything they had been through, they might have to fight again. "Can you identify them?" he asked. "Sir, they're broadcasting Galactic Council identification codes. It looks like the official rescue fleet finally arrived." Captain Nero felt a mixture of relief and worry. Relief that help was finally coming, but worry about what would happen when the Galactic Council learned about the humans and their impossible capabilities. The age of humanity and the stars was about to begin, whether the galaxy was ready for it or not. The Galactic Council rescue fleet that arrived at the scene was impressive by any normal standard. 12 sleek vessels with the latest technology, medical facilities, and diplomatic personnel. But compared to what Captain Nero had just witnessed, they seemed almost fragile. The lead ship was the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Voice, commanded by Council Admiral Zex. His voice came over the communication channels with the crisp, efficient tone that Council officers were trained to use. "This is Admiral Zex of the Galactic Rescue Coordination Service. We received a distress signal from a Volani research vessel. Please identify yourselves and report your status," Commander Morrison responded calmly. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the Human Exploration Fleet. We have successfully rescued the Volani survivors and several Zelthak personnel. All rescued individuals are receiving medical care and are stable." There was a long pause before Admiral Zex replied. When he did, his voice sounded confused and concerned. "Human? I'm sorry, Commander, but I don't have any record of a species called humans in our databases. What star system are you from?" "Sol system," Morrison replied. "Third planet from the star. We call it Earth." Another pause, this one much longer. Nero could hear hushed conversations in the background on the Council ship's communication channel. Finally, Admiral Zex spoke again, and this time his voice was tense with worry. "Commander Morrison, please maintain your current position. Do not approach our vessels. We are consulting our records regarding your system. Dr. Elena, who was still caring for Nira in the medical bay, looked troubled. "That doesn't sound good," she said quietly. 20 minutes later, Admiral Zex called back. This time, his voice was carefully controlled, like someone trying very hard not to show fear. "Commander Morrison, according to our stellar cartography databases, the Sol system is classified as Restricted Zone 77 Alpha. The third planet is listed as a Class 12 death world. No intelligent life is supposed to be able to survive there, let alone develop space travel." Morrison's reply was dry. "Well, Admiral, I guess your databases need updating." Captain Nira was listening to this exchange with growing understanding. The humans had just revealed themselves to the galaxy, and the galaxy's reaction was fear. She couldn't blame them. She had seen what these beings could do, how they could survive in conditions that would kill anyone else. "Commander," Admiral Zex continued, "I need to ask you some questions. How many of your people have left your home system? Are there other human fleets in galactic space?" "This is just an exploration mission," Morrison replied honestly. 5 ships, about 200 personnel total. We're mapping unexplored regions and looking for new worlds to study." But even as he said it, Nira could hear the implications. If humans could build ships this tough, if they could survive conditions this extreme, what would happen when they really entered galactic civilization in large numbers? The Council ships began scanning the human vessels with every sensor they had. The readings they got back made no sense according to everything they knew about starship design. The human ships were built like mobile fortresses, with redundant systems and armor thick enough to survive impacts that would destroy normal vessels. "How much does your largest ship weigh?" Admiral Zex asked. "The Defiant Dawn? About 12,000 tons, Morrison replied. Nira heard gasps from the Council ship's crew over the open channel. Most galactic ships her size would weigh less than 2,000 tons. The humans had built their vessels 5 times heavier than normal, using materials and construction methods that seemed to assume their ships would be regularly attacked by forces that would destroy anyone else. Engineer Tom from the heavy lifter was coordinating repairs with the Council technical teams, and his casual comments were terrifying the alien engineers. "Yeah, we lost about 60% of our forward armor, but the backup plates held fine," he was saying. "The radiation shielding took some damage, but nothing we can't patch up. We've got spare parts for most systems." "Spare parts for 60% armor loss?" one of the Council engineers asked weakly. "Standard procedure," Tom replied cheerfully. "You never know when you're going to run into a solar storm, asteroid field, or hostile aliens. Better to be prepared." The medical exchange was even more revealing. Dr. Elena was working with Council medical personnel to transfer some of the more seriously injured Villani to facilities better equipped for their physiology, but the Council doctors were amazed by the human medical procedures. "You operated on them in how much radiation?" Dr. Yill, the lead Council medic, asked in disbelief. "About 400 rads per hour," Elena replied. "It wasn't comfortable, but it was manageable with our standard protective gear." 400 rads per hour would kill most species in minutes, Dr. Yill said. "How are your people still alive?" Elena shrugged. "We're adapted to high radiation environments. Our homeworld has a pretty active magnetic field and gets hit with solar storms regularly. You develop tolerance." As the transfer of the rescued aliens continued, more details about humanity emerged. The humans carried weapons that fired solid projectiles instead of energy beams. Their ships used nuclear reactors that most species would consider barely contained bombs. Their spacesuits were designed to operate in vacuum for days at a time. Everything about them suggested they came from a world that was actively trying to kill them. And they had not only survived, but thrived. Captain Nira found herself in the unique position of being the first alien to have extended contact with humans. Admiral Zex requested a private communication with her to get her assessment of these new beings. "Captain Nira," the Admiral said carefully, "I need your honest opinion. Are these humans a threat to galactic civilization?" Nira thought about everything she had seen. The humans fighting through impossible odds to save people they had never met. Their willingness to sacrifice themselves to protect others. Their casual competence in situations that would terrify most species. "Admiral," she said finally, "they are the most dangerous beings I have ever encountered. And they are also the kindest." "What do you mean?" "They could have left us to die. No one would have blamed them. Instead, they risked everything to save us. They fought a superior force to protect people they had never met. But Admiral, The way they fight, the way they survive impossible conditions, if they ever decided to become conquerors instead of rescuers, no one in the galaxy could stop them. There was a long silence on the communication channel. "What do you recommend?" Admiral Zex asked finally. "Welcome them," Nira said without hesitation. "Make them our friends, not our enemies. Because ready or not, humanity has entered galactic space. The journey back to Valani space took 3 weeks. During that time, the humans and the Council fleet traveled together, learning about each other. The humans were curious about galactic civilization, asking questions about trade, politics, and technology. The Council personnel were fascinated and terrified by human capabilities in equal measure. Commander Morrison found himself in constant communication with Council diplomats who were trying to figure out how to integrate a species that seemed to break all the rules. Humans were too tough, too adaptable, too willing to take risks that other species considered suicide. "Commander," Admiral Zex said during one of their regular conversations, "the Council is going to want to send a diplomatic mission to your Earth. We need to understand your people better." "You're welcome any time, Admiral," Morrison replied. "Though I should warn you, Earth isn't exactly a vacation destination for most species. You might want to bring some serious environmental protection." When they finally reached Valani space, the reception was unlike anything in galactic history. Word had spread about the rescue, about the mysterious humans who could survive impossible conditions and fight against overwhelming odds. Some species wanted to welcome humanity with open arms. Others wanted to quarantine Earth before humans could spread throughout the galaxy. Captain Nira gave her official report to the Valani government, but she also sent a private message to her people. "We have encountered our guardians among the stars. Treat them well." The human fleet was invited to visit several worlds to share their story. At each stop, the reaction was the same: amazement, gratitude, and barely concealed fear. Humans were living proof that the galaxy was a more dangerous and wonderful place than anyone had imagined. On the bridge of the Defiant Dawn, Commander Morrison received a message from Earth. More human fleets were being prepared for deep space exploration. Humanity was ready to take its place among the stars. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're getting requests for meetings from over 30 different species. Everyone wants to know more about us." Morrison looked out at the stars and smiled. "Well then, I guess we better get ready to make some new friends." Behind them, safe and healing in the medical bays of both human and Council ships, the survivors of the crisis looked forward to going home. They carried with them the knowledge that the galaxy had changed forever. Humanity had arrived and nothing would ever be the same. In secure Council chambers across known space, alien leaders debated the implications of humanity's emergence. Some saw opportunity, others saw threat, but all agreed on one thing: the age of humanity among the stars had begun and the galaxy would have to adapt. Captain Nira, fully recovered from her radiation injuries, stood at the viewing port of her new ship and watched the human fleet preparing for their next mission. Somewhere out there, other beings might need help, and now she knew that help would come. Carried by the children of a world so dangerous it had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before. The Deathworlders had answered the call, and the galaxy would never be the same. The darkness of space stretched endlessly in all directions. Stars dotted the black canvas like tiny diamonds, cold and distant. In this quiet corner of the galaxy, nothing had disturbed the peace for centuries. Admiral Koreth stood on the bridge of his massive warship, the Crimson Death. His red eyes scanned the displays showing patrol routes and conquered worlds. The Krellian Empire ruled over 47 star systems with an iron fist. No one dared challenge their power. "All quiet on the borders, Admiral," reported his second officer, Vrel. The tall alien's 4 arms moved across control panels with practiced ease. "The slave worlds are sending their tribute on schedule." Koreth nodded with satisfaction. 3,000 years of conquest had built the greatest empire in known space. Every species they met either served them or died. It was the natural order of things. The bridge was filled with the soft hum of computers and the quiet chatter of crew members. Red lights cast eerie shadows on the walls lined with weapons from defeated enemies. Everything felt normal and peaceful. That peace shattered in an instant. "Admiral," the navigation officer's voice cracked with fear. "Unknown contact in Sector 7. It just appeared out of nowhere." Koreth's blood went cold. Nothing could hide from Krellian sensors. Their technology was the most advanced in the galaxy. "Show me," he growled. The main screen flickered to life. At first there was only empty space. Then the sensors focused and something impossible came into view. A ship hung in the darkness, but it was like nothing they had ever seen. The vessel was huge, easily twice the size of their largest battleship. Where Krelian ships were sharp and angular like weapons, this stranger had smooth curves and strange angles that seemed to bend light around them. Blue energy pulsed along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at. "What is that thing?" whispered Vrel, his voice barely audible. "Run a scan," Korath ordered, trying to keep the fear out of his voice. "Find out what we're dealing with." The sensor officer's fingers flew over his controls. "Sir, the readings don't make sense. The energy output is off our charts. The hull material is unknown. And the weapons," he paused, his face pale. "I can't even identify what type of weapons it has." Korath felt something he had not experienced in decades of conquest. Real bone-deep terror. This ship was beyond anything in their databases. It didn't belong to any known species in the galaxy. "Sir, it's moving," called the tactical officer. The alien ship turned toward their fleet with fluid grace. There was no visible exhaust or energy discharge. It simply moved like it was swimming through space itself. Every alarm on the bridge began screaming warnings. "Battle stations," Korath shouted over the noise. "All ships prepare for combat." 36 Krelian warships powered their weapons and raised their shields. They formed an attack formation that had conquered 100 worlds. Surely nothing could stand against such firepower. Then the transmission came. The voice cut through their communications like a blade through silk. It spoke in perfect Galactic standard, but the accent was completely unknown. Most terrifying of all, it was calm and controlled. "This is Captain Reynolds of the Earth vessel Defiance. You have 10 seconds to withdraw from this system before we consider you hostile." The bridge fell completely silent. Even the alarms seemed quieter. Every eye was fixed on the view screen showing the impossible ship. "Earth?" Vrel whispered. "No such world exists in our star charts." "Sir, what are your orders?" asked the weapons officer, his voice shaking. Korath's mind raced. In 3,000 years, no one had ever made demands of the Krelian Empire. No species had ever threatened them. They were the hunters, never the hunted. 5 seconds, came the calm voice from the alien ship. The countdown continued with mechanical precision. 4, 3, 2, "Sir," screamed the tactical officer. "That ship is charging weapons. Energy levels are beyond measurement." Korath stared at the screen, frozen by indecision. His pride as a conqueror warred with an instinct for survival he thought was long dead. The Krelian Empire had never retreated, never backed down, never shown weakness. 1 second, said Captain Reynolds. The words hung in the space between heartbeats. 36 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy faced a single unknown vessel. Mathematics said they should win easily. Technology said they were superior. History said they were unstoppable. But deep in Admiral Korath's gut, a small voice whispered that everything was about to change forever. The age of Krelian dominance was ending, and something new and terrifying was about to begin. "Time's up," came the voice from the human ship. The Defiance began to glow with power that made the stars themselves seem dim. Whatever was about to happen, Korath knew with absolute certainty that the galaxy would never be the same. Around them, space itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the storm that was about to break. The Krelian Empire, undefeated for 3 millennia, was about to face its first real test, and somewhere in the back of his mind, Admiral Korath suspected they were going to fail. The human ship hung in space like a sleeping giant, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Its blue lights pulsed in steady rhythm, like a heartbeat counting down to Judgment Day. In the command center of the Defiance, Captain Marcus Reynolds stood calmly at his post. His brown eyes were fixed on the enemy fleet, but his expression showed no fear or excitement. He looked like a man doing a job he had done many times before. "Captain," said his tactical officer, "enemy ships are powering weapons." "Understood," Reynolds replied quietly. "Defensive systems online. Prepare to return fire." His crew moved with smooth efficiency. There was no panic, no shouting, no desperate activity. They worked like a well-oiled machine that had been built for exactly this purpose. "Sir, shall I hail them again?" asked the communications officer. Reynolds shook his head slowly. "They've made their choice. Now we make ours." The two forces hung in space, separated by a few million kilometers and an ocean of misunderstanding. On one side, the largest fleet the Krellian Empire had ever assembled. On the other, a single ship from a species no one had ever heard of. The odds seemed impossible. The outcome seemed certain, but in the depths of space, appearances could be very deceiving indeed. Admiral Korath looked at his fleet status display. 36 ships, over 50,000 trained warriors, weapons that could crack planets in half, against one lone vessel from an unknown world. All ships, he said into his communicator. Open fire. Destroy that thing. The die was cast. The battle was about to begin. And the galaxy was about to discover that humans had some very strong opinions about empires built on slavery and conquest. In the silence between stars, two civilizations prepared to meet for the first time. Only one of them would walk away unchanged. The space around Admiral Korath's fleet erupted in deadly light. 36 warships unleashed everything they had at the single human vessel. Particle beams, plasma cannons, and fusion torpedoes streaked across the darkness like angry stars. The barrage was enough to destroy a small moon. The combined firepower of the Krellian Empire's finest ships could level cities and crack continents. Nothing in the known galaxy could survive such an attack. The weapons struck the Defiance and simply stopped. A shimmering barrier of blue energy surrounded the human ship. The deadly beams and explosives hit the shield and scattered like rain on a window. The barrier didn't even flicker under the massive assault. Impossible, breathed Commander Vrel, staring at the tactical display. Nothing can withstand that much concentrated fire. Admiral Korath felt his world crumble around him. His most powerful weapons, the tools that had conquered dozens of worlds, were completely useless. The human ship sat in space like nothing had happened. Sir, enemy vessel is returning fire, called the tactical officer, his voice high with panic. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Reynolds watched the light show with calm professional interest. His ship's shields had barely registered the attack. The alien weapons were primitive by human standards, hardly worth noticing. Commander Torres, return fire, he said quietly. Precision strikes only. Disable their engines and weapons, but leave life support intact. Aye, Captain, replied his tactical officer, a woman with steady hands and cold eyes. Targeting their power systems. The Defiance responded with surgical precision. Beams of pure energy reached out and touched each Krellian ship exactly once. The weapons were so advanced that they passed right through the alien shields as if they didn't exist. Engine rooms went dark. Weapon systems overloaded in showers of sparks. Communications arrays melted into slag. In less than 30 seconds, the entire Krellian battle fleet was dead in space, not destroyed. Not vaporized, simply turned off like light switches. Admiral Korath slumped in his command chair, staring at the damage reports flooding his screens. Every ship in his fleet was powerless. They couldn't move, couldn't fight, couldn't even call for help, and the enemy hadn't even used their full strength. This is Captain Reynolds, came the calm voice over the communication system. Your vessels have been disabled, not destroyed. You will be boarded for questioning. Any resistance will be met with lethal force. Sir, whispered the navigation officer, what manner of beings are we dealing with? Before Korath could answer, the human ship began launching smaller craft. Sleek shuttles detached from the Defiance and moved toward the helpless Krellian vessels. They flew with the same impossible grace as their mothership. Prepare to be boarded, Reynolds announced. Follow our instructions and you will be treated fairly. Resist and we will respond accordingly. Korath had no idea what treated fairly meant to these humans, but something in the captain's tone made it clear that cooperation was strongly recommended. The first shuttle docked with the Crimson Death with barely a whisper. Korath waited in his ready room, trying to project authority he no longer felt. His remaining officers stood around him, weapons drawn but hands shaking. When the door opened, the being who entered was not what any of them expected. Captain Reynolds was of average height for his species, with graying hair and brown eyes that seemed to see everything. He wore a simple dark uniform without the elaborate decorations common among galactic military leaders. Two armed soldiers flanked him, their weapons humming with barely contained energy. Admiral Korath, Reynolds said with a polite nod. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I wasn't aware I had a choice, Korath replied, trying to keep his voice steady. There's always a choice, Admiral. Some are just more pleasant than others. Reynolds took a seat without being invited. I have questions about your government. You dare interrogate a representative of the mighty Krellian Empire? Your empire just attacked my ship without provocation, Reynolds said calmly. Under the laws of war, that makes you combatants. You have rights, but you also have obligations. Commander Vrel stepped forward angrily. You have no authority over us. We are citizens of the greatest power in the galaxy. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Reynolds didn't raise his voice or make any threatening gestures, but something in his manner made both aliens take an involuntary step backward. Sit down, Commander, Reynolds said quietly. Vrel found himself obeying before he realized he had moved. Now then, Reynolds continued in the same conversational tone. Tell me about your empire. How many worlds do you control? 47 systems, Korath answered automatically, then cursed himself for the quick response. And how did you acquire them? Through strength. The weak serve the strong. It is the natural order. Reynolds made notes on a small device. I see. And the people on these worlds, do they have any say in how they're governed? They serve the Empire. That is their purpose. Without rights, without representation, compelled to work under threat of violence. Reynolds looked up from his device. Admiral, where I come from, we have a word for that arrangement. The interrogation continued for hours. With patient, methodical questioning, Reynolds extracted details about the Empire's structure, its military capabilities, and most importantly, its treatment of subject species. Each answer painted a picture of systematic oppression on a scale that dwarfed anything in human history. Korath found himself answering every question. There was something about the human captain that made resistance seem pointless. Not fear exactly, but a sense that this being already knew the answers and was simply confirming facts. How many sentient beings live under Imperial rule? Reynolds asked. Approximately 40 billion, Korath replied, not counting the Krellian citizens themselves. And these 40 billion people, they have no freedom of movement, no choice in their occupations, no voice in their government. They are subjects, not citizens. They exist to serve. Reynolds was quiet for a long moment, his brown eyes studying Korath's face. When he spoke again, his voice was very soft. Admiral, I've studied history. I know what that's called. Something in the human's tone made Korath's blood run cold. This wasn't anger or disgust, though both would have been understandable. This was something far more dangerous. This was judgment. Finally, Reynolds stood and walked toward the door. Thank you for your cooperation, Admiral. You've been very educational. What happens now? Korath asked quietly. Reynolds paused with his hand on the door control. Now I make my report to Earth Command. And then humanity decides what to do about your empire. You can't threaten us. We have thousands of ships, millions of soldiers. Admiral, Reynolds said without turning around. You just watched 36 of your best warships get disabled by a single human vessel. In 30 seconds. Without us breaking a sweat. He turned back to face the Krellian officers, and they saw something in his eyes that made their knees weak. Do you really want to find out what happens when we stop being polite? As Captain Reynolds left the room, Admiral Korath sank into his chair. For 3,000 years, the Krellian Empire had been the apex predator in their region of space. That era had just ended, and somewhere in the depths of space, Earth Command was about to receive a report that would change the course of galactic history forever. The emergency meeting took place in a room that didn't officially exist. Deep inside the Earth Defense Command Station, the most powerful people in human space gathered around a circular table. Holographic displays showed star charts, fleet positions, and classified intelligence reports. Admiral Victoria Cross called the meeting to order. Her steel-gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her blue eyes held the weight of countless difficult decisions. She had commanded fleets in 3 wars and never lost a battle. Ladies and gentlemen, you've all read Captain Reynolds' report. The situation is clear. We've encountered a militaristic empire spanning 47 star systems, built on slavery and conquest. General Harrison Webb leaned forward, his scarred hands clasped tightly. The numbers are staggering. 40 billion sentient beings held in bondage, entire species reduced to slave labor. The question, said Ambassador Patricia Zhao, is whether this is our problem. Earth's colonies barely span 12 systems. Do we have the authority to intervene? Secretary of Defense Robert Kim adjusted his glasses, studying the tactical reports. Authority aside, we may not have a choice. This Krellian Empire views any unknown force as a threat. They proved that when they opened fire without warning. The holographic display showed footage from the battle, 36 alien warships firing everything they had at the Defiance, the human vessel's shields absorbing the attack without strain, the precise surgical response that disabled the entire enemy fleet in seconds. Assessment, Admiral? Asked President Martinez, attending the meeting through a secure link from Earth. Militarily, they pose no direct threat to our forces, Cross replied. Our technological advantage is overwhelming. A single human destroyer could disable their entire battle fleet. She paused, choosing her words carefully. However, their willingness to use force against civilian populations makes them extremely dangerous to their subjects. The room fell quiet as everyone considered the implications. Humanity had sworn after the Third World War that they would never again stand by while innocent people suffered under tyrants. But this was different. This was on a galactic scale. What do we know about their military structure? Webb asked. Captain Reynolds, attending virtually from the Defiance, activated his tactical display. They rely on brute force in overwhelming numbers. Their ships are primitive but numerous. Intelligence suggests they have over 10,000 vessels spread across their territory. 10,000 ships, whispered someone at the table. All inferior to our technology, Reynolds continued, but they're not the real problem. The real problem is what they'll do to their subject populations if we intervene. Ambassador Zhao frowned. Explain. Scorched earth tactics. If they think they're losing, they'll murder every slave in their empire rather than let them go free. We're talking about potential genocide on an unimaginable scale. The room fell silent again. Everyone understood the horrible mathematics of the situation. Save 40 billion people, but risk having them all killed in the attempt. Other options? President Martinez asked. Diplomatic pressure through other galactic powers, Zhao suggested. Economic sanctions, isolation, General Webb shook his head. What other galactic powers? Our intelligence suggests the Krellians are the dominant force in this region, and they don't seem interested in trade or diplomacy. Targeted strikes against leadership, someone suggested. Possible, Reynolds said, but risky. Their government structure is hierarchical and redundant. Remove one leader, another takes his place, and they've had 3,000 years to perfect their control systems. President Martinez was quiet for several minutes, studying the reports and star charts. Finally, she spoke. Captain Reynolds, in your professional opinion, is there any chance of peaceful resolution? Reynolds' image focused intently on the screen. Madam President, I spent hours talking with their officers. Their entire culture is built on the idea that might makes right. They see conquered people as property, not beings with rights. In their minds, they're not doing anything wrong. And your recommendation? Limited military intervention to liberate key systems, followed by support for local independence movements. But we need to move carefully. One mistake could trigger the very genocide we're trying to prevent. The debate continued for hours. Some argued for caution, others for immediate action. Military advisors presented battle plans while diplomats suggested negotiation strategies. Intelligence officers briefed them on Krellian weaknesses and strengths. Through it all, one fact remained clear. 40 billion people were depending on decisions made in this room by people they would never meet. There's another factor to consider, Reynolds said during a brief pause. During my interrogation of Admiral Korath, he mentioned something called the Great Silence. Several of their outer colonies have gone dark in recent months. Admiral Cross looked up sharply. Dark how? No communications, no shipping, no contact at all. They assumed it was natural disasters or equipment failures, but now they're not so sure. You think there's another power in the region? It's possible. The Krellians have been expanding for 3,000 years. They may have finally run into someone who can fight back. This added a new dimension to the problem. If there was another major power in the region, humanity's intervention could trigger a three-way war with unpredictable consequences. Intelligence assessment? Cross asked her staff. Unknown, Admiral. We need more data before we can make any conclusions. President Martinez called for a final vote. All in favor of limited military intervention? Hands rose slowly around the table. Not unanimous, but a clear majority. Motion carries. Admiral Cross, you're authorized to deploy the Third Fleet for liberation operations. Rules of engagement are to minimize casualties while maximizing strategic impact. Understood, Madam President. Target priorities? Start with the outer systems. Smaller populations, weaker defenses, better chance of success. We need to prove this can work before we attempt anything on a larger scale. As the meeting broke up, Captain Reynolds remained to speak with Admiral Cross privately. Admiral, there's something else. During the interrogation, I got the impression that the Krellians are more afraid than they're letting on. This great silence has them spooked, meaning they might be more willing to negotiate than we think. If we can convince them they're facing threats on multiple fronts, they might consider cutting their losses. Admiral Cross nodded thoughtfully. Or they might decide to go down fighting and take everyone with them. Yes, ma'am. That's the risk. Captain, you've had the most direct contact with these beings. What's your gut feeling? Reynolds was quiet for a long moment, thinking about his hours with Admiral Korath. The fear in the alien's eyes, the way he answered questions without thinking, the obvious shock at meeting a superior force. My gut says they're bullies, Admiral. They're used to picking on weaker opponents. They've never faced a real fight in their lives. And when bullies get cornered, they either surrender or lash out wildly. The trick is making sure they choose surrender. Admiral Cross stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, 40 billion people were waiting for freedom they didn't even know was coming. Captain, prepare your ship for extended operations. You're going to be our point man for first contact with their subject species. Aye, Admiral. Any special instructions? Yes, remember that we're not just fighting the Krellian Empire. We're fighting 3,000 years of learned helplessness and despair. Some of these people may not believe freedom is possible. Understood. And Captain, be careful. The easy part is over. Now comes the real challenge. As Reynolds' image faded from the screen, Admiral Cross continued staring at the stars. In her 30 years of military service, she had never faced a challenge quite like this one. But then again, that's what humans did. They took on impossible challenges and found ways to win. The throne room of Emperor Vaxon was a monument to cruelty and conquest. The walls displayed weapons and artifacts from 100 defeated civilizations. The floor was made from precious metals mined by slave labor across 47 star systems. At the center of it all sat the Emperor himself on a throne carved from the bones of his enemies. Vaxon was a massive creature, even by Krellian standards. His 6 arms ended in razor-sharp claws that had personally executed countless rebels. His red eyes burned with the fury of someone who had never been denied anything in his 3,000-year reign. You dare bring me this report? His voice echoed through the chamber as he glared down at the messenger trembling before him. Fleet Commander Nex had been hastily promoted after Admiral Korath's disgrace. He bowed as low as possible while still being able to speak. My lord, our border fleets have encountered the human force in 5 more systems. Each engagement has ended in total defeat. Impossible. Our ships are the finest in the galaxy. Numbers mean nothing against their technology, my lord. Nex's voice shook with remembered terror. A single human vessel destroyed an entire battle group at Kepler Station. They move faster than anything we've ever seen. Their shields cannot be penetrated. And their weapons. The fleet commander shuddered, remembering the reports from the few survivors. Human weapons that passed through Krellian shields like they weren't there. Energy beams that surgically disabled ships without destroying them. Technology that seemed like magic. Emperor Vaxon rose from his throne, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. For 3 millennia, his empire had grown through overwhelming force. Primitive species were crushed, advanced ones were absorbed. It was simple, efficient, and had never failed until now. What of the reserve fleets? Vaxon demanded. Surely they can overwhelm these humans through sheer numbers. My lord, I must advise extreme caution. Our intelligence suggests the humans have barely begun to show their true strength. The Emperor moved faster than thought. One moment Nex was speaking, the next he was pinned against the wall by Vaxon's claws, gasping as they pressed against his throat. I did not ask for your opinion, Worm. I asked about our reserves. 10,000 ships assembled and ready, my lord. Nex wheezed. Vaxon released him and returned to his throne. Good, deploy them all. Every ship we have. These humans may have superior technology, but they are few. We are many. Mathematics will prevail. As Nex hurried away to relay the orders, Vaxon activated his private communication system. The hologram of his intelligence chief, Spymaster Krex, appeared before the throne. My lord, the Doomsday Protocol. Are the weapons in place? Krex nodded, his scarred face showing no emotion. Every subject world has been prepared as you commanded. Hidden fusion bombs in major population centers, biological weapons in the water supplies, Orbital platforms ready to sterilize entire continents. Good. If these humans want to play Liberator, they'll learn the price of challenging the Krellian Empire. The plan was elegant in its cruelty. If the humans continued their campaign, Vaxxon would activate the hidden weapons simultaneously across all subject worlds. 40 billion slaves would die in minutes, denying humanity their prize and sending a message that would echo across the galaxy. Better to rule over ashes than to not rule at all. My lord, Krex said carefully. Are you certain this is wise? Once activated, the protocol cannot be reversed. Vaxxon's laugh was like grinding metal. Wisdom is for the weak. I have ruled for 3,000 years because I am willing to do what others cannot. If I cannot keep these worlds, no one will have them. Unknown to either of them, human intelligence agents were already at work. Advanced stealth technology allowed them to infiltrate Krellian facilities undetected. Within hours of the Emperor's decision, Earth Command knew about the Doomsday Protocol. Aboard the Defiance, Captain Reynolds stared at the intelligence report with growing horror. The scope of the planned genocide was beyond anything in human history. 40 billion innocent beings would die simply to deny humanity a victory. Options, Commander Torres? He asked his tactical officer. Limited, sir. The weapons are hidden across 47 worlds. Too many targets for surgical strikes. We'd need simultaneous operations on every subject world to prevent mass casualties. Time frame? Intelligence suggests the Emperor will activate the protocol within 72 hours, regardless of our actions. He's using the entire slave population as a human shield. Reynolds walked to the viewport and stared out at the stars. Each point of light potentially represented billions of lives hanging in the balance. The weight of responsibility was crushing. Sir, Torres continued, there's something else. Our deep space sensors are detecting massive fleet movements. Every Krellian ship in the Empire is converging on our position. How many? Conservative estimate? 10,000 vessels. The bridge fell quiet. Even with their technological superiority, those numbers were daunting. The Defiance was powerful but not invincible. Orders, Captain? Asked his communications officer. Reynolds turned back to his crew. They looked to him with confidence and trust, believing he would find a way through this impossible situation. That faith was both inspiring and terrifying. Send a message to Admiral Cross. Tell her it's time for Operation Final Gambit. Sir, the risks. Lieutenant, there are 40 billion people counting on us to do the impossible. Reynolds' voice was steady, but his eyes showed the weight he carried. Sometimes the right choice and the safe choice aren't the same thing. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the greatest fleet humanity had ever assembled was moving toward the Krellian home system. Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Indomitable, watching the tactical displays. Fleet status? She asked. All ships ready for combat operations. 150 vessels, including our newest dreadnoughts. 150 ships against 10,000. The odds were worse than anything in human military history. But humans had always specialized in winning impossible fights. Ma'am, her intelligence officer reported, we're receiving updates from our agents on the subject worlds. The Doomsday weapons are more extensive than we thought. Planet killers, biological agents, orbital bombardment platforms. Time to simultaneous activation? 68 hours and counting, Cross nodded grimly. They had 2.5 days to defeat the largest empire in known space, disable thousands of hidden weapons, and liberate 40 billion slaves. It was impossible. It was insane. It was exactly the kind of challenge that brought out the best in humanity. All ships prepare for hyperspace jump. Destination, Krellian home system. Admiral, her tactical officer said quietly. Once we jump, there's no going back. We'll be committed to total war. Commander, 3,000 years ago, humans nearly destroyed their own world because they couldn't agree on how to live together. We learned from that mistake. We swore we would never again stand by while innocents suffered under tyrants. She turned to face her crew, and they saw something in her eyes that had terrified humanity's enemies for centuries. Today we keep that promise. In his throne room, Emperor Vaxxon felt the first stirrings of unease. Reports were flooding in of human fleet movements, of impossible technologies, of victories that defied explanation. For the first time in 3,000 years, he wondered if he might actually lose. The thought was so alien, so impossible that he pushed it away immediately. He was Vaxxon the Conqueror, master of 47 worlds, slayer of kings and breaker of species. He would not be defeated by a handful of unknown aliens from an insignificant world. But deep in his mind, a small voice whispered that perhaps it was already too late, that perhaps the age of Krellian dominance was ending, and something new and terrible was about to be born among the stars. The final battle was approaching, and nothing would ever be the same. The Krellian home system had never seen anything like it. 10,000 warships filled the space around the capital world like a swarm of angry insects. Every vessel the Empire could muster had been called to defend their homeworld from the human threat. Emperor Vaxen stood in his command center, watching the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. The humans had only brought 150 ships. Even with their superior technology, they would be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. "My lord," reported Fleet Commander Nex, "the enemy fleet has dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. They're maintaining formation and advancing slowly." "Excellent. Let them come. When they're fully committed, we'll crush them like insects." Vaxen's claws clicked against his command throne. The Doomsday Protocol was ready. If somehow the humans managed to win, he would activate it and deny them their prize. 40 billion slaves would die, but the galaxy would know that no one challenged the Krellian Empire without paying the ultimate price. Aboard the human flagship Indomitable, Admiral Cross studied the enemy formation. The Krellian fleet was massive but poorly organized. They relied on intimidation and brute force rather than tactical skill. "Analysis, Commander?" she asked her tactical officer. "Classic hammer formation, Admiral. They plan to surround us and batter us to death through concentrated fire. It's crude but potentially effective given their numbers." "Weaknesses? Poor coordination between fleets. If we can break their formation, they'll have trouble reforming. Also, their flagship is obvious. That massive vessel in the center of their formation." Cross nodded. The Krellian command ship was 3 times larger than any other vessel, bristling with weapons and covered in armor. It was an impressive sight, but it also made an obvious target. "Signal all ships. Execute Plan Alpha on my mark." The human fleet suddenly changed formation. Instead of advancing in a traditional battle line, they spread out into a complex 3-dimensional pattern. To the Krellians it looked like chaos, but there was method in the madness. "Now," Cross said quietly. The human fleet attacked from every direction at once. Their ships moved with impossible speed and grace, dancing between Krellian formations like ghosts. Energy weapons reached out with surgical precision, disabling enemy vessels without destroying them. But this time was different. The humans weren't trying to capture ships. They were buying time. As the space battle raged, thousands of human soldiers were already at work on 47 different worlds. Special forces teams used advanced technology to infiltrate Krellian facilities and locate the hidden doomsday weapons. On Zelthara Prime, Sergeant Jake Miller led his squad through the underground tunnels beneath the capital city. Their mission was simple in concept but nearly impossible in execution. Find and disable a fusion bomb capable of killing 50 million people. "Contact ahead," whispered his point man through the comm system. 2 guards, Krellian military." "Take them quietly," Miller replied. "We can't afford to raise any alarms." The guards never knew what hit them. Advanced stunning weapons dropped them instantly, leaving them unconscious but alive. The human squad moved past them like shadows. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Human teams raced against time to find and disable weapons of mass destruction, while their fleet held the Krellian military's attention. In the command center of his flagship, Emperor Vaxen watched his ships fall one by one. The human vessels were too fast, too maneuverable, too well coordinated. His massive fleet was being picked apart like prey animals. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. "Over 3,000, my lord," Nex replied, his voice barely audible. "The humans are targeting our engines and weapons. They're disabling our ships rather than destroying them." "Why? Why aren't they finishing us off?" Before anyone could answer, new alarms began sounding throughout the command center. Red lights flashed as damage reports flooded in from across the Empire. "My lord," screamed the communications officer. "We're receiving reports from all subject worlds. Human forces have infiltrated our facilities. They're targeting the doomsday weapons." Vaxen felt his world collapse around him. Somehow, impossibly, the humans had learned about his secret protocol. Even now they were racing to disable the devices that represented his final option. "Activate the protocol now," he roared. "Kill them all!" My lord, many of the devices are already offline. The humans have disabled over half of them. Then activate the ones that remain. Spymaster Krex's hands flew over his control board. Across 23 worlds, hidden weapons began to power up. But as each device came online, human teams were there to stop them. On Vorthak 7, Lieutenant Maria Santos arrived at the biological weapon facility, just as the automated systems began releasing deadly toxins into the water supply. Her team's portable purification devices worked frantically to neutralize the poison before it could spread. On Kelmar Station, Commander Tom Bradley's engineers managed to shut down an orbital bombardment platform seconds before it could fire on the cities below. The massive energy buildup dissipated harmlessly into space. One by one, the doomsday weapons were found and disabled. Human technology and determination proved superior to Krellian cruelty and desperation. In the space battle, Admiral Cross pressed her advantage. The Krellian fleet was in complete disarray, their formations broken and their command structure collapsing. "Signal the enemy flagship," she ordered. "I want to speak to their Emperor." The transmission cut through the chaos of battle. Emperor Vaxen's image appeared on the main screen, his red eyes blazing with fury and defeat. "Surrender your forces," Cross said simply. "The Doomsday Protocol has failed. Your hidden weapons are disabled. You have lost." "Impossible. Those locations were secret." "Nothing is secret from us, Emperor. We know about every weapon, every hidden facility, every plan you've made. Your empire is finished." Vaxen's claws extended fully, scraping against his command throne. "I will never surrender to inferior aliens. The Krellian Empire will fight to the last ship." "Then you condemn your people to die for nothing," Cross replied. "Your choice." The battle continued, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Human ships systematically disabled the remaining Krellian vessels, while liberation forces secured the subject worlds. On Theater 9, Captain Reynolds personally accepted the surrender of the planetary governor. The alien official was trembling with fear as human soldiers secured the government complex. "What will happen to us?" the governor asked. "That depends," Reynolds replied. "Will you cooperate with the transition to democratic government?" "Democratic? Rule by the people. The slaves you've kept will become free citizens. They'll choose their own leaders and determine their own fate." The governor looked confused. "But who will tell them what to do?" "They'll figure it out. Humans have learned that free people make better decisions than slaves." Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place. Some Krellian officials cooperated willingly. Others had to be arrested. But the message was clear. The age of empire was ending. In his command center, Emperor Vaxen watched his life's work crumble around him. 3,000 years of conquest undone in a single day. His empire reduced to rubble by a species he'd never heard of until a week ago. "My lord," Nex said quietly, "the human admiral is offering terms. Surrender now, and she guarantees fair treatment for all Krellian citizens." "Fair treatment," Vaxen spat, "from the humans who destroyed everything I built." "My lord, perhaps the Emperor's movement was lightning fast." His claws opened Nex's throat in a spray of blue blood. The fleet commander collapsed to the deck, his life ebbing away. "I am Vaxen the Conqueror," the Emperor roared. "I bow to no one." He activated his personal weapon systems, targeting the human flagship. If he was going to die, he would take as many humans with him as possible. The energy beam from his ship struck the Indomitable's shields and simply stopped, absorbed harmlessly by technology he couldn't understand. Admiral Cross's response was swift and final. A single shot from her ship's main gun penetrated the command vessel's defenses and vaporized the bridge. Emperor Vaxen, ruler of 47 worlds, died still believing in his own superiority. The battle was over. The Krellian Empire, which had terrorized the galaxy for 3 millennia, was finished. In the aftermath, human teams worked around the clock to establish temporary governments on the liberated worlds. It would take years to undo the damage of imperial rule, but the work had begun. Captain Reynolds stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching relief ships arrive at former slave worlds. Medical supplies, food, teachers, engineers, everything needed to help 40 billion people learn how to be free. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving thank you messages from dozens of worlds. The liberation forces are being welcomed as heroes." Reynolds nodded, but his expression remained serious. "The easy part is over, Lieutenant. Now comes the real work, sir." building something better than what we tore down. That's going to take generations. But as he watched the stars, Reynolds allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had kept its promise. They had stood up to tyranny and won. 40 billion people would go to sleep tonight as free beings for the first time in their lives. It was a good day's work. In the depths of space, the last Krellian ship surrendered to human forces. The age of empire was ending and something new was about to begin. The galaxy would never be the same. And in the quiet corners of space, other powers watched and wondered. If humans could destroy the mighty Krellian Empire in a single day, what else might they be capable of? The galaxy was about to find out.